a lot more stuff happening, and a lot more of you'll see Christians and Muslims in the same area.
Yeah.
And there is a little bit of tension. Granted, like nothing broke out when I was there, but like there were, you see people who were, when it was a certain time, like they were getting down and they were praying out in public, and people feel a certain way about that just because of what's happening up north.
Right.
But I would say when I left the airport, there were certain places where I felt like the mood was different than how it was in the place where I stayed the entire time.
Yeah.
Just because I'm sure they had probably seen or been in some situations where they had to protect themselves. So like it was a totally different feel where like they were just kind of looking like, I don't know you, kind of thing. So yeah, I wouldn't say that Nigeria is completely void of that type of energy, but
you were in a special place.
I was in a place that happened to be special, and like the different places that I went, because I went to I went to 5 different states when I was there as well, and I think I was just blessed to be around like the right people.
Yeah.
Because one of the brothers that I met there was telling me this, because I was just so happy about things, and he was like, he's like you're also very blessed to be around the right people. He was talking to people who made it happen. He's like, you're very blessed to be around them because they have brought you to a place where you can actually do this and not be bothered by certain issues that would probably, kind of deter your direction.
Right.
I was like, what do you mean? And he said, well, there's places in Lagos where they live. It was some brothers who were visiting, and they were like, there's places in Lagos where we live where as soon as they were like, you look like us, but there are people who will take advantage of you when you open your mouth and they notice you're not from here.
Right.
And they will play like they're your friend.
Right.
And then probably take advantage of you in some kind of way just because of the way their life is. And they put their life over yours and they'll want what you have.
Right.
So, yeah, that is definitely a possibility as well.
Sure. And so how did that influence the work you made?
Well, there were similarities as well as differences, and but I would say the biggest thing that came across was the fact that there were more similarities than there were differences, because I was thinking everything was going to be different. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna learn a totally new way of living from being over there,
right?
And it was. I would say I learned that I started thinking in the way of spectrums from being over there, because just like there's a spectrum of like blackness in America, there's also a spectrum of being African, being Nigerian.
Right.
For one, I was wondering everybody's wearing like these patterns for most of the time, but there's still there's still a little bit of like what the British left over there. Yeah, there's still some there, and so when it comes to like the way men dress, some of them still do decide that I'm going to dress like in this way, like in a Western fashion. Right. And so there are some who prefer it and think that like that is forward, and there are some who don't. And so I learned that like there's that spectrum that's there. But the thing that I thought was amazing was the things that we do that are almost exactly alike from people who've never been to America.
Right.
And I just thought that was amazing, like things like handshakes. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that it's like there's no class where like you learn like, okay, so if you're black in America, you do this handshake. It's just something that kind of happens where we all do the same. It's like a handshake where we slap each other's hands and kind of lock it in some kind of fashion, and then that's how we greet each other. Right. They did that there. It's like they do the same thing. And I was like, okay, y'all do that. And then I was like, where does that come from? And they were like, it's that's the thing. It's how we greet each other. That's the thing. And they also talk about like the way they interact with each other, like as people, is something that my elders here talked about how they used to do that, like we've lost. And it was identical. Like when it comes to how highly regarded your elders are. Right. That's still in effect there. And as a community, you all know each other, and you can discipline each other's children because it's out of love. And I know your parents, and I know you know better than this. So I'm going to say something to you. That's how it used to be here. I mean, they say that all the time. Like, you know, they call it the old school. And the way you conduct yourself because of your association with your family. All right, don't you embarrass the family. Right. That's the way it still is there. They're like, okay, you are part of this family. You know that when you go outside of this house, how you're supposed to act. Right. And so there was that, because it was like this abstract concept of time being the only difference between us here and us there. Because it was like, okay, if it was 40 years ago, customs would be the exact same. Right. From all those interactions to family dinners to the way the neighborhood is when something happens, the way everybody's involved, the idea of being in each other's business, not being a bad thing. It was just like the honesty, all of that was there.
That's really interesting. I mean, and you know, it makes me think. You know, a lot of the things you're talking about make me think of this theme of being in exile, right? Which is like an overarching theme, you know, in the Bible, right? You know, being in exile, being, you know, whether that's, you know, the Jewish people being, you know, in captivity away from their homeland, or being in slavery, and or even, you know, as Christians being, you know, in a world that you're not necessarily, you don't really feel like you belong because you're different or whatever. And, you know, I'm wondering if, like, you know, that sense of growing apart is, you know, like, or you were saying that the cultures would have been more similar 40, 50 years ago. Is that, you know, because, you know, Black Americans are becoming more and more integrated into some cultural norm.
Yes.
And, you know, which, you know, I guess it's a question of, you know, is that good or bad or not, you know, neutral, right? I mean,
I kind of wrestle with that a little bit, because that's one of the things I was thinking. I was like, is this because of our direct contact with like social norms that go against what we were taught, or what? Because like some of our connections with Africans, the things that we do and the way that we are, they almost seem like cellular. It's almost like it's like there's something that's in our DNA that says that, like, this is what comes from that. But I was wondering, like, is this a thing that is purely connected to our direct contact with it?
Right.
Because I sat in on a symposium about the direction of being African, like the direction of the African people. And one of the things that a lot of people had as concerns was straying away from who they are, right, to be more Western. That's what they kept talking about. They were like, we're losing who we are. We're losing our culture. And Western culture is like threatening who we are, because our children are valuing that more. Right. And so I think part of that may be, and I don't like to call it a bad thing when it comes to learning about another culture and being immersed in it. It's only bad when you start to abandon who you are. Right. And then there's a generation that comes after you. Like your progenies are only knowing this new thing that you've started, and then that wasn't carried on to them, so then that becomes who they are, who they think they are. So I don't like to call it a bad thing, because I think it keeps you, I think it makes you, I'll say, a little bit more flexible. I would say it's part of development, is learning about what's around you. Right. But I also think it's really important to have a nice understanding of like who you are, so that you can then add to whatever it is, whatever society you live in. but it's the losing of that identity, that sense of self that can become problematic.
Right. And so you're able to use the comparing and contrasting from that. I mean, I'm sure it was a real enlightening experience, and that, and so like these folks along the back wall here, are they folks that you interacted with in Nigeria?
So anybody with a pattern on their skin is Nigerian. That's people I interacted with Nigerian, and the ones without the pattern on their skin are American. And I paired them with each other for kind of like this relationship that they had, like their personality, or just their life. And so one in particular, one pairing that I liked more in theory than maybe the execution itself, with these two.
Yeah.
So her name is Torera, and that's her son Kikyogu. And this is Kedra and her son Xavier.
Right.
So I call them like my host family, because that was a family that I spent a lot of time with. Right. Like we all stayed I didn't live in their home, but like where I lived, I was a couple minutes away from their home, and I spent a lot of time in their home, and we had dinner together a lot. And so she is the sister of the woman of the house, and so she and her husband brought her son. They live in Lagos, and this was maybe the second day I was there. Her husband is a photographer, and they had a photo shoot for their son. Their son had just turned 6 months, and this was a big thing.
Yeah.
And so they got dressed up and they had this photo shoot, and it was amazing. Like him getting older was a great thing, and that's how it is there. It's like you're getting older, you're becoming a man. This is amazing. And so I paired it with Kedra and her son Xavier, because for a black woman raising a black son, him getting older means a totally different thing. And in Nigeria, for most of them, they're like, everything is in front of you now.
Right.
I've taught you all of this. You can go and you can have whatever it is your heart is set on.
Right.
By God's grace, you can make anything happen. That's what they say. And with Kedra and Xavier, and I think about like my own experience getting older and having my parents tell my brothers and I, okay, now it's time for us to have this talk.
Right.
And so, I thought about how there's two totally different things, when it comes to your son getting older. It's like one has to do with, let me tell you about all the things you shouldn't do, and all the things you can't do, and that will keep you alive, or that will make your life easier, as opposed to all of this stuff that you can do. This is what's going to be in front of you, and this is what kind of life you will have if you do this and you do that and you do this. Make sure that this happens for you. And I thought about that stark contrast where they both do it because of the life they want.
This is your inheritance versus this is your fate.
Yes. This is your inheritance versus this is what you should steer clear from.
Right.
This kind of thing. These are the limits on your life, so to speak. And
or the pitfalls.
Pitfalls.
Right.
Yeah. Pitfalls of like what's in front of you. And so that I chose a specific pattern for them. It's called that's a pattern called talking drum. And that's one of the patterns that I actually knew about from speaking to a batik artist. It's called Talking Drum, and he talked about the story behind it, where because all these different patterns in batik and adire mean something, and so he told me the story behind it, where he's okay. So the talking drum is connected to the parents. The child's understanding of their parents' voice, so to speak. Right. He was saying a parent can allow their child to go to like another village, can go to like a village over and play with his friends, And when it comes to a certain time, whatever time it